This call is being recorded.
Hello.
Hello. Good morning.
Hi, Alan.
How's it going?
Good. Is it just the two of us on the call and you just want it recorded?
Yeah, I just want to be able to
Yeah, sure. That's fine.
package it up for these guys. So along with my notes, we can.
That
All
sounds
right.
good.
So you had a few things you wanted to change.
No, I don't want to change anything. I
You
don't want to
change
change
anything. All right.
I don't want to touch anything because we had it working at the end, and
Right.
I just wanted us to be able to talk about what it takes to get it up and running for a launch on February 1st without any hiccups when we launch. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that. I will perhaps be making some deletions to our contact list, which I don't think will be a huge issue for you. And if it doesn't happen right away, it's not going to be a big deal. I anticipate there will be kids that may withdraw from the study between now and when we launch. So if they're actively withdrawing themselves, then they're not going to be trying to access, so it doesn't really matter. But so just that's the only thing I can think about changing, that I would think about changing, would be the contact list, or that's what I call it. You know what I mean when I say that?
Yes.
Yeah. So the list
people who receive notifications.
Yeah,
people
exactly.
Who receive notifications.
Exactly. And
so what would prompt people to withdraw, having already gone through the first phase of this?
They don't want it. They don't want to do it again. That's it. As simple as that. Or their circumstances have changed, so it would be difficult for them to do it. And so along those lines, we are doing a larger survey before, with our bigger group, prior to us doing the app survey again, which we did before. And we are asking kids if they're still on their campus, and if they're not, where they are. And so I bring that up because to see what the possibility is from your end of accommodating changes in time zones for a kid here and there.
Okay, so I was on my campus. I graduated early, just to create a circumstance.
It could be that. It could be I graduated mid-year, or I'm thinking more I'm studying abroad.
Oh, I see.
I'm somewhere else this semester.
Yeah.
I'm not on my campus for whatever reason. I'm doing a co-op. I'm doing an internship. I dropped out of school. Or most likely scenario, I think, is I'm studying abroad. I don't think it's going to be a huge number. We are going to assess it. So I'm just wondering what your ability is to make accommodations for those kids, realistically.
So what we did to create the time zone thing is we created a numeric value. And that numeric value was to calculate plus or minus off of the East Coast, kind of like the way you count time regularly against Greenwich Mean Time, right?
Right.
You just take a number and you take a place, and then you subtract that number. Pretty sure we're on a 24-hour clock anyway, in terms of the way the cron system works, the notification system works.
Yeah.
So the only thing that would change here is if they're studying abroad, then we'd have to make sure that we're accounting for the 24 hours of the Earth. and so to make sure that numeric value is not plus or minus 3, which is what it was before, or 4. You know what I mean? So before it was just a couple of numbers. It was 1 and 2, it was 0 and 1, as I recall, and ones were all West Coasters and zeros were all East Coasters, right?
Okay, I got you.
But the business logic that sat behind that said, if you're a 1, count 3 hours, right?
Okay. Yep.
Plus 3 hours. So it's not a big deal for us to switch this. I just want to make sure that there's a two-digit accommodation for being somewhere else.
Okay.
And that would be my first and probably only concern, because it's not as if we weren't doing multiple time zones before, and I kind of know the way they're calculating it. So that wouldn't be a problem. But what you're saying is that's going to be a fixed question for those people. So your daughter's a perfect example, studying abroad in Greece, and they're +7, something like that, right?
Yep.
7 hours ahead. And so make sure that math is put in for that location. So we just need to know the time zone of where those people are, and then just calculate the numeric value differential. I don't see that being a substantial issue.
Okay. Well, so my take on it is, if I'm hearing that you think it's possible without screwing up things that we already have in place, is that we should have that information. We will have that information before February 1st, but we will know who it applies to, so we can communicate with them and let them know we're trying to make accommodations for them. So, whatever it takes for us to get there, if it takes us a little time, that they're patient with us, and we'll work to make that happen. But I don't anticipate it being a huge group, but I do anticipate there being some of it. Whether or not they will participate because of it is a whole other question. Again, my daughter being a perfect example. She didn't have an international plan. So for her to do this study in Greece would have been near impossible. She was able to text, but she could only text when she had Wi-Fi, So I think we have to take that into account. So whether or not they'll even participate is a whole other issue. But knowing that we have the capability to do our best to accommodate that, it's good to know, so we can have that discussion with them when we find out that they're somewhere else.
I'd be more concerned if we only had a single time zone to begin with, but we don't. So
we've already done it.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine that this is a heavy lift at all. And we'll fat finger the people in, meaning it's not like we have to upload a list and stuff like that. It's going to be a handful of people,
right?
And then to your point of removing people from the system. You already have the capacity to do that on your dashboard. I got to check to make sure that when you delete them, I remember there being a problem when we deleted a user in which they weren't getting the notifications anymore, but I'm not sure that they were actually removed from the system, but you still want to have all of their data from before. So I got to do a little checking on that front to make sure that the dashboard access that you have to remove a user enables you to remove that user, keep their data, and when you remove the user, is it actually removing them from the study, or is it removing just the notifications? Because I remember that was a little bit of a weird thing that took place at one point.
Right. I never actually, I never personally removed anyone. There were people that withdrew through the course of the last time that I had notified you about. So at some point you had removed them.
That's right. And that's why I remember this issue. I removed them myself.
Right.
And then I remember having this dialogue with RS about what did I just do because we want their previous data. And I think the answer was their previous data was, again, I got to check because I think what happened is they definitely stopped receiving the notifications right away. That wasn't a problem. It's like when you shut off the user. Yes, when I shut off all users and turn back on all users, that stops the notification system.
Right.
But the issue was, do they still get to go in and log in? If you follow what I'm saying.
Right.
There's kind of three states here. There's the notification state, which, as I indicated to you, is a completely separate system, if you will, to send out these text notifications and send out these in-app notifications, as opposed to the application itself being up and running and available for that person to fill it out at 8 o'clock at night, right?
Right.
So that's separate. And then the third issue, which is paramount, is the preservation of the data. So I want to just make sure that removal is kind of removing access. I don't want you, for example, to see on the reports that the person didn't take the survey. You know, that one report that shows when surveys are taken?
Yeah.
I don't want you to look at that and see the same person every day removed, because then after the fact, that gives you bad data. Because it makes it look like
they still be in the denominator.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm actually more concerned about 1 and 3. I'm more concerned about people not receiving notifications in that whatever data we have collected is preserved. So
yes. I know that when you remove them or I remove them, they don't get notifications. That I'm not concerned at all. They just don't.
Okay.
But the other two I'm concerned about because, I remember there was something really quirky about this in which I thought I had removed them.
Yeah.
And then we realized that they had access to the app. Not that they'd necessarily want to take it. I mean, if they're telling you that they want to be removed, then they're not probably unlikely to take it. But again, it should be very clean. There should be none of these issues.
Yeah, so it sounds like it'll be helpful to have a review of the process that we need to go through to withdraw a person, and what panel that comes from, or dashboard, I'm sorry, activates that. So yeah, so that's, those are the two things that I foresee coming from us. That and it will be last minute because I'm not having kids actively withdraw right now because they have had no communication with us nor any reason to since they stopped their survey back in December. But we'll re-engage them next week. And we'll be asking them about the change in their location in their survey, which will launch next week and wrap up on the 29th. So those are the two things that I can anticipate, as changes, which is very different than changing the survey, that I'd anticipate.
Okay. Well, that's not. Yeah. It doesn't strike me as being a particularly heavy lift. So.
No, I don't think it should be, and I'm doing everything to make it so we don't have any heavy lifting here. We had enough of it before.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd like this to be as seamless as possible.
Well, when we shut it off, just so you're clear, not that I'm not going to promise you that we don't have to go back and check everything, but they literally did two minor changes to stop access and to stop notification.
So, would it be...
So theoretically, they're reversing that process and just flipping the two switches back again.
Does it make sense for there to be a trial run with you and me, like
Absolutely.
The week before?
Absolutely. Several days beforehand, let's shut all the users off, make sure all the users are shut off, turn on you and me,
Yep.
and let's start putting in some fake surveys
Okay. So,
and receiving notifications. Right, everybody else is shut off,
right.
and you have access to the dashboard to turn them all on, but you'll probably want us to be involved in turning them all on because you want all hands on when we do it in case there are some issues.
Yeah, I'd like you to be turning them on.
Right.
Yeah.
And then so you and I, and then did you again want to start with the 2:00 survey on the 1st?
I meant to ask that question today and I forgot. Let me get clarification on that and I'll get back to you.
Okay.
So let me find out which survey we'll start with on the 1st. 2:00 goes back to the morning. Doesn't rely on any data. Probably, but let me clarify that.
Okay.
Okay. So can we start piloting or turn notifications back on next Wednesday, the 24th, for you and I?
Yep.
That'll give us a week. Hopefully we don't need it, but that will give us a week to run through.
Yep. Did you do any did you send out emails or anything else to the group and ask about their experience beyond the first couple of weeks technical issues?
No, do you mean any kind of debriefing kind of stuff?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. And honestly, somewhat intentionally, I again I didn't want there to I didn't want to make any changes.
Right. You didn't want to invite changes, so by asking the question,
Yeah.
necessarily. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah. I mean, it took so much to get this working. I didn't want to break it again.
Right.
Yeah. Did you have a particular question in mind or thought about it? Is that why you asked?
No, I mean, you had somewhere. I think you were in Greece when one person had a massive delay that proved probably to be their device. But the general handling is the only kind of concern. I just want to make sure that people who got in it and did it were doing their own workarounds and stuff like that. They were just doing what you and I were doing.
Right. So so our protocol here was anyone that didn't take a survey for 2 days in a row, anything, if they were inactive for 2 straight days, we called them. And so I think we got a pretty good sense of people that weren't using it because they were having technical problems. So you're right. There could have been some faction out there that had figured out what to do on their own. They weren't using it as necessarily intended, but figured it out. Like the number of people that couldn't, for whatever, I know you guys figured out. I'm still not sure. Couldn't log on the way we wanted and had to use a workaround, right? Like I had heard from a bunch of those people, but you could also see there were a bunch of people that were doing it, and we resolved that. But I feel like I feel like I had a very vocal group, and they did let me know when they were having technical problems, which was great because then we could resolve it. And for those that weren't taking it, we did actively pursue them to see if they were having technical problems that we could resolve. So even though I didn't ask the questions, I feel like we got some pretty good information. Yeah, there could be other stuff out there that I don't know about.
Okay.
But I don't
And
think,
then
I
the
don't
only
think,
other thing my team has to check on is, have there been any updates to the OSs
yeah,
and any changes, new phones? Like if you remember those Pixel phones that came out, the two of your folks had those
yeah,
new Pixel phones, and we had to make a special change to the app side of this to make sure they can log in. I'm
right.
gonna see if there's any risk around those things as well.
Okay. Yeah, so these were the things that I was thinking of. One is just to ensure that you didn't make any changes to some underlying systems that you're using, because it seemed like, you know, we had quotas on emails and other things. So to make
Right,
sure that all of those systems are the same and that those quotas
right,
are where they need to be. All of those little quirky things that we learned along the way, to double check
right,
and make sure they're all lined up and working the way that they were towards the end. Um,
right.
so so double checking on that. And and the other was that I do anticipate that we're going to have kids that got new phones in the last couple of months, because it just seems to happen. Um, so I think having more of a proactive approach for, now that we're not in crisis mode anymore, having a more proactive way of handling those kids. If they're having troubles immediately, then figuring out a way to connect with them, doing what you need to do so you can help them through the process.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you. We have a little bit of time here, so we should take some of it for that kind of pre-check. And although I will tell you that I thought the new device part of it, we never had an issue with that.
So I'm talking about these two kids in particular. Is that what you're talking about? The new device issue?
No, I was talking about the person who wants to claim that they have a new device, who
Yeah,
didn't have. If you remember, the biggest problem we had was that young woman who went from who had to go out and buy a Apple,
right.
an iOS, but the Android wasn't working, right?
Yeah,
But beyond that, one person, we had two people, right? Both, one went from an Android to an Apple, and the other one from an Android, Apple to an Android, if I
right,
remember it right. And then beyond that issue that we had to work out, and we did figure out later on that one of them was this Pixel phone thing.
right.
Beyond that, the people who tried to use a different device to log in, they didn't have any issue.
No, agree.
That,
For a great majority, they didn't, but for the ones that did, I would say on average, we spent a week trying to get it working. And I
right,
think we need to decrease that time greatly. And,
right,
we have a few standard, okay, try this, but after we've exhausted that, have a system where we can have, I don't know what needs to happen. I don't know who they need to speak to. It's not me.
right,
So
right,
again, like, have a protocol in place for people that are having difficulties, and I can follow it to a certain extent, and then I need to hand it off to you, and you guys have a protocol for how you manage that. That's that's more
right.
what I'm thinking about. For the few
Yeah,
that do have problems, that's assume that we're going to have that again, and
right,
what should our process be for managing that better? And so
right.
it
Yeah.
takes 2
I
days
mean,
versus 7 days.
in defense of those issues, which there were, like we tried to get on the phone with that. We waited 2 hours to get on the phone with that woman, Julie.
Oh yeah, no,
Um,
I know. I'm
but
not. I'm not saying it's nothing that needs to be defended. I'm just saying, we know this is happening. We didn't know
yes,
how to address it before. We now realize there are just some phones that are funky, and that you guys need to be able to ask them
Right.
questions and work with them.
That's
You
right.
know, and I don't want to have to get them to you each and every time they say it can't work. You know, if you can tell me, have them go through these 3 steps, Carrie, before we triage them, then we can do that's all I mean. And then once
Right.
we've gone through that, you guys need to talk to them. How are we going to connect that? How are we going to make that connection? They are college students. They're not. I can't call them up at 11 and say, can you talk to someone at noon? You know, the likelihood
Right.
that they're going to say yes is extremely low.
No.
But yeah,
Right.
I mean, to some extent, they have to be responsible for it too. But just having a system in place to make that happen a little more quickly.
Right. Yep.
Because
I got you.
it seems like when we come across those issues, once you guys have the opportunity to speak with them, you can figure out what the problem is, and you need to make, you know, individualized tweaks, is what I'm understanding, to be able to accommodate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. For the great majority, right? For 90%,
Are more than fine.
it's gonna be,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And
Yeah.
then for the handful of people that just got this new device with this new OS, so suddenly we're going to find out that something or another is not working. And then, so we have, just so we're clear, we have 2 cycle problems, right? You have the college kid cycle that you're describing, and then
Yeah.
we have the Indians that are 10 hours away,
Time difference.
right?
Yeah.
So that's where we have to fix what we've been doing for you, which is once we understand what you get when you get it. Like let's say you get something at 2:00 survey.
Yeah.
You know, it is 12:30 now at night for these guys, and they thought they had a successful day because the morning survey went out, everything was fine, there are no complaints, seems like it's humming along. This is the thing that was my biggest frustration during the ability for me to best service your study,
Yeah.
which was this middle cycle time, because you know RS, and he's going to listen to this review, he's a very early riser, but not so early that he has to get to bed at, let's say, 12:30, and then whoever's remaining, like Lukman, who's the late nighter, he's incapable of fixing the one problem that seems to have cropped up because that's not his bailiwick.
Yeah.
So we, toward the end, we really got it right in terms of how these guys were cycling in, even though they were less needed at the time.
Yeah.
We did figure out correctly how best to accommodate the servicing of that. So when we start, we need to make sure that is, we don't want to go back to where we were originally. We want to go back to where we were last, where we had very good coverage. People got in touch with each other. They answered their phones late at night. And I'm going to check to make sure there are no Indian holidays, which, you know, we had Diwali really affected us for 2 or 3 days, it's like the worst time to have Diwali. I'm going to check to make sure there are no holiday calendars and to make sure there's coverage around the calendar.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that was on my list of things to discuss is their schedule as well. And so it seems to me like it would be reasonable to have kind of 24/7 coverage the first week. And,
Yeah.
you know, provided that everything goes smoothly, then that can be, you know, diminished. It might need to be more on our time schedule versus theirs while the survey is open. But I do think until we get through a week's work, we need to know that there's someone there making sure that things are happening the way they're supposed to be happening. Are you in the same?
Right.
Are you thinking the same
Well,
thing?
my only concern about what you said is that having sort of all 6 people who were dedicated to your project being on American time, which now which includes West Coast time, for a whole week when there's no issues, it probably will be tough to pull off. Because we have other development projects which these guys also have to do. Could they move their work to that time? Or they talk to RS about it and see if we could make that happen. But I'm not clear on the development calendar what they're expected to work at and who else they're supposed to be working with who may be on Indian time. You know what I mean? Because we have external resources that we use and the like. So I don't want to commit to something that I can't be sure of that would work correctly. So
Okay, yeah. So why don't you get back? I'm sorry?
Certainly the first few days, it's critical that we have support on our time, meaning U.S. time zones, because there will be people who bought new phones and, there's just going to be stuff, right?
Right. Yeah, there will be stuff. And again, provided, if it all goes smoothly and the issues are as small as we have kids with new phones, so we need to resolve that, and we don't have the issues, and I'm certainly hoping that we don't, but we don't have the issues that we had at the launch before, then yeah, I mean, I don't think we need 24/7 coverage. But if we do have those issues, I want to know that they're prepared to be dealing with it, I guess is more where I'm coming from. Which I would not have, I wouldn't have said if we didn't have this before. But given that we did, I'm optimistic it's not going to happen, but I also want to know that we're prepared for the worst.
Right.
And so it would be helpful to know, what they, in an ideal situation, what they're going to do, but what their backup plan is if things don't go off as expected.
Right.
Is that a more fair?
Now I think we're on the same page now. That's right. That's
okay.
That's a fair way to think about it.
Okay. So back to my original point about trying to streamline this process for kids that are having problems that need to communicate with you guys. Maybe the best thing to do is to have set times every day where we can have that kind of communication. So, sometime in the morning and sometime in the evening, our time that also in some way works with their time would be great. So we can have some set of reasonable expectations. So I can say to a kid, hey, this isn't working. I need for you to talk to our tech people. They're available from 10 to noon or 6 to 8 or whatever it is.
Right.
So maybe that's another part of your scheduling conversation.
That's a good plan.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan.
Okay.
And then the last thing I was going to sort of propose to you is that to sort of deal with this phone thing, there are 2 other strategies we may want to consider.
Mm-hmm.
One is to have a non-notification, take a phony survey for everyone 2 days or a day before the actual launch, sort of a soft launch, where you send around an email to everyone and say, take some time today to please, log in and take a survey. We're not counting the data. We just want to make sure you're up and running fine.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one option.
Yeah.
The other option is to take a survey and say, let me know if you had a new device. If so, what's that device?
Yeah, yeah, that's an easy one for me to do. Um, which kind of leads to the next question I had for you. So if whether or not I have a new device, if I need to load the app again because either I erased it or deleted it, or I have a new device, just remind me of the process that I need to go through. Um,
You go in the store.
Yeah, if I have a new device, if I have my old device, yeah, I go to the store, I upload it. Then do I have to re-register myself?
If you have a new device and you log in for the first time, you've not stored anything into the cookie on your phone. So
Right.
you will have to register, right? When you go to log in, it's not going to say for the first time, it's going to go
It doesn't know you.
through the original registration thing that we went through, because because the phone itself, when the app is on, it looks at the cookie, it says, did this guy already create a PIN? If so, just enter your PIN. If it
Okay.
doesn't know that, it's going to ask you to register. When you register, it's going to check your the email that you say, oh, yes, this is an approved email. Then you'll get a verification code.
Yep.
And you'll enter in your PIN, and then you're good to go. And then we know that that's a new device.
Okay. So that just happens with a new device. So if I erase my app and I load it again, I don't need to re-register because in the cookies it will know that I've already registered that app.
No, because it's the same situation. Because if you deleted the app, you deleted the cookie.
Sorry.
Most likely.
Okay. So anyone that has to load the app again will have to go through the registration process again.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. I just want to know that.
Yeah.
I'm
The
sorry.
only complication you're going to have again is the people who enter in the wrong email addresses. We had a whole bunch of those where they forgot which email they had registered with you.
Right.
And there was a little bit of confusion around your Apple ID.
Right.
So they have an Apple ID they need to get into with their email for Apple to download the app, and then they had to remember the email they gave to you. And we had, a couple of dozen of those people.
Right. Yeah. And there can also be issues like one of my email addresses isn't working right now, so this is why I am cognizant of it. I wouldn't be able to register because I wouldn't get the activation code because I can't access that email. So
right,
and I can see that happening if kids. I don't anticipate this is going to be a large number, but if I left Brown, I would no longer have access to my Brown email address. So I could enter it, but I couldn't get that activation code. So those are just minor things to be mindful of.
Right. And we could fat finger, and we did for several people, fat finger in a new email address for them to get an improved registration.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Well, those are all good things to kind of keep in the back of our minds. And if those are the issues that we're dealing with, then that will be great.
Yeah, right.
Because that means everything else is working, and these are just minor things that we would expect. Excuse me, we would expect. Okay.
I agree, and I'll be praying for that.
Yes, me too. We shall start now. Okay. Anything else I should be thinking of?
No, I think we've got it. There is one more thing I'm continuing to work with team on. In fact, Satya contacted me today about cleaning up all of the data issues for Christie. And there were, I shouldn't say all of them because that would give you the impression that there were a lot of them. But we have worked on it. I haven't checked it out. I know Satya made changes, and he's looking for me to make some comments on those changes. So I'm actually going to get in and do that now.
Okay.
But it's important that we make sure that the file that you have right now that has the 33,000 surveys.
Yeah.
And I talked to Christy about it. I mean, I said, you must be giddy over how much data you have. She says, I don't even know how to really get started on it. It's so much data. Right?
It's overwhelming, yes.
Yeah. And, but there were issues that she went over that, they were important but narrow issues. Like we had a limitation on the number of caps that people had. I mean, are they really having more than 15 drinks, right?
Mhm.
So we limited that data because Christy wanted us to put each cap as its own field.
Yeah.
So you have all these people who are sort of drinking normally or smoking normally, and they have 4 or 5 or 6 during the course of an evening. And then you have somebody who's 25. So you have all these fields that you're creating for 2 people.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
And only those 2 days, or only that one day.
Right.
Right?
But you need 25. Now all of a sudden you need 25 variables, where for the average person you would need a max of 10, let's say.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we had set it at 15, but I'm still working with the team to look at what they actually did to check that out. The other issue that we had, Christy, that I think we fixed, is she wanted more information when you got into the how high am I? So what we were doing is we were telling you the X and Y coordinate at the time that you went into very high drug, right? When you went into that zone, that became a time and then a single variable.
Right.
And she wanted to break up the variables to get more data by saying, in that box of very high, I wanted to have sort of 4 variables in that box. And we went back and forth because I questioned, if a person goes from the very beginning of very high to the very end of very high but doesn't go further, is that data? Is that information?
Right.
But she's the researcher. I try to ask good questions. I don't mind doing the work. That's not the problem. But if I'm drunk and I'm very high, and my finger is on the screen, I mean, am I actually differentiating between 1 and 4 in that instance? I don't know.
Right.
There's a leveling of all that, right? Because when you have 33,000 surveys, and you'll have twice that number, and actually you'll probably be more effective this time because you won't have any blips in the operating of the software. So you may end up with 70,000 records. I mean, it just seems to me that there has to be a leveling off on some of these data elements.
Mhm.
And then the last part of the data is we still had a little text in there that had to be made into numeric values.
Yeah.
Which again, I have to check to make sure the team did that.
Okay. Great.
So that was all the time.
Okay. All right. I'll let her know you're still working on that. Yeah.
Yes.
So as you were talking about that, I guess the other thing to check is, and I haven't looked at it since we ended the study, so I might still have access to it, but just making sure that those dashboards are still accessible and we are getting the data, because I access that every day.
Yeah,
So
just make sure that the Just make
I guess
sure
when you and I
that,
test it, I can do that.
yes, certainly. And just make sure you put in the right date range, because the date is all still there for you.
Right.
It just is, it's probably defaulting to today's date, which of course is wrong.
Yeah, right. Okay. Okay.
All right?
All right. So just to summarize, you're going to see if we can do a trial beginning next Wednesday. You're going to talk to your team about scheduling and how we're going to work the first week, particularly, and then after that, what it'll look like, and also get some time frames that we can dedicate for kind of problem solving with participants. And I am going to get back to you about what time we're going to begin on February 1st. Was there anything else? Any other action items?
Yeah, I'm going to
and you're going to talk to your team about just checking and making sure everything is in place that we had before is working and in place.
Yes, I'm going to go through the process of turning back on.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to accept that we're all set. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not going to accept when they tell me we're all set.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to check on the time zone issue.
Yep.
And then I'm going to check to see if any new phones or new OS upgrades have been launched since we left our hero. And then you wanted me to check on the withdrawal process.
Yep.
Which, I told you there were 3 states associated with that, and I want to make sure that I fully understand and appreciate how that gets done, and then I'll pass that along to you. And then you have asked that we be the ones to turn everybody on, turn everybody off, and do these withdrawals, even though you have the capacity to.
If you give me clear instructions on how to withdraw someone, I'm fine with doing that. You just said that I have the ability to. I just wanted to. I don't want to turn everyone on. I definitely want you guys to turn everyone on. But if a one-by-one piece, I'm happy to do that. If you just give me the steps to do that. I just wanted to make clear that I haven't done that before.
Yeah, and as you recall from earlier in this conversation, last time we did that, there was some weird stuff where I went in and shut somebody off, and then I found out later on that just meant that they weren't receiving notifications. But I want to get that all straightened out.
Okay.
Before I say that you could do it.
Yep.
Just so that you know what you're doing. You know what the implications of what you're doing.
Right. Okay.
All right.
And data is preserved. Okay, that sounds great.
All right, thank you.
So will you get back to me early next week about your conversation with these guys on staffing?
I'm going to get back to you early next week about all of this.
Okay, excellent.
All right.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
All right, Alan, have a nice weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.